Oh, you can, they have a dining room that kind of right there.
Susie, Susie, I think we're set. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the First Thursday lecture series. And we are down to the hardcore of our audience, and thank you for being here. Just before we get started, to let you know, we've got 2 more talks scheduled for this spring. We will not be doing a talk next month. It'll be June 1st when our next talk. And that's put on by the old men at McDonald's. And they're going to be talking about stock car racing in Ontario County and the Ewing Racing Team. If you're familiar with Tom Ewing, Tom lived right down the street from me and kept the car on the track for years and saw a lot of the top racers, drove for him at one time or another. So I don't know very much about stock car racing. What I do know, I've learned from having coffee with Tom and the other old men at McDonald's. And so the group of us are going to be talking about how that's changed over the years. Tom was sort of the last of a generation of people that could actually put together a car in your garage and keep it going and race. Now a lot of it's just too expensive for one person to do out of their garage. And then we're going to try a Sunday talk. Babette will be talking about Victor Barnes and agricultural history, and it's in conjunction with a barn survey that they'll be taking of all the barns in Victor. And I think she also has some artists who are going to be around painting pictures of the barns, and I think some of the talk will be displaying some of their work and talking about that part of the project. So those are the next things we've got going on. Next season, starting in the fall, we're going to try going on Sunday afternoons rather than on Thursday nights and see if that attracts more people. Just, it's a little bit easier, especially as the nights start earlier, makes driving easier for people. And we just thought maybe we'd get a better attendance if we did it during the afternoon on Sundays. So that's going to be a change next year, and we're looking, if anybody would like to talk or has suggestions for talks, see me afterwards and we'll try to arrange it. Tonight, we have Frank Tischer coming back to us. Frank did a talk here probably 5 or 6 years ago. It was pre-COVID. I'm not sure, that's everything I measure now is either it was pre-COVID or after COVID. But it's probably been a good 5 or 6 years since he's been here. Frank grew up in Victor and graduated from the Victor schools, was a school teacher and taught social studies, right? Most of the time.
Reading too, and writing.
He's traveled, he's volunteered, he is a lecturer and author, and we are very glad to have Frank back sharing memories of growing up in Victor. So, Frank?
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and I got something to confess to you. I love to read, but when I read, it's silent reading. Now I found out when wanted to do this with you, I have to read out loud. And when I read out loud, I run out of breath. And then right in the middle, I have to catch a breath. And so, and also, I tend to read too fast and overlook certain things. So it may turn out as a jumble, but I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. Now, do my best. I grew up right across the street here, and that was the Victor Tischer Funeral Home. And I've got a lot of stories about that. They're not in any of these. But growing up, the front porch was a huge thing to me because there's so many things that happen in connection with that front porch. As I look at porches today, you notice a lot of them aren't much wider than that. And they can just barely put some chairs on them. And there's hardly any people on those porches. And that's interesting. I know Darrell and I, my wife Darrell and I took a walk around Canandaigua, and quite a few years ago now, and looked at front porches, and there was nobody on them. Compared to what I grew up on, it's just like night and day. Well, anyway, I'm going to start out with the front porch. And should these people have, Darrell, do you want to get them? Yeah, because they can do better than I can probably. If they read this. 32. Yeah. It's on page 32.
You're reading from the first,
Am I?
which is fine.
No. I'm reading from this one, the front porch.
Growing up in Victor.
No, this is not.
That's your first one.
I'm on a good start
But
here, aren't we?
you can read out of either one.
Yeah, I can read. I was going to say, I thought there would be something here for them to read. There will be later. I call this the front porch, and it's from the old book, which goes back more than 5 years because COVID wasn't anywhere close. So,
5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Saw it when I was putting.
now, okay. Hey guys, we can't use the porch tonight. Bill Jared is laid out in the front room. All 6 of my buddies showed disappointment, but they knew we could not go back and we could go back and play basketball on the barn. We would just have to be more quiet than usual. The front porch was getting crowded as mourners arrived to pay their respects. Some gathered inside, while others, who were cigar smokers, moved out on the porch and found a place to sit. Folding chairs with the name Tischer on the back had been placed conveniently around the glider along 2 sides of the wicker chairs out there to accommodate those who wanted to reminisce about the life of old Bill. The porch showed a somber mood the next day when the casket was escorted to the waiting hearse. Growing up in a funeral home didn't seem unusual for me, and I loved the front porch. As a small child, I could make the glider swing and at the same time observe the whole world around me. The world included the big red letters that spelled out mobile lubrication on the gas station across the street. Eventually, those letters became integral in helping me unlock the mystery of the English language. Next in my line of sight was a white cement block building with a big glass window sporting the letters Sale Brothers Chevrolet, and that's on that picture on that wall back there. In front of the 3 or 4 new cars were lined up in front of the building. When a car or two was sold, a huge big truck carrying 5 or 6 new ones pulled up, and in front of our house, I watched with fascination as the driver backed cars down a ramp that was hitched to the lower deck of the car carrier and lined them up at the curb. Then from way up on top, let's see, where am I? Then way up on top was a bright yellow beauty, and it was eased slowly down through the steel ramp until it reached the pavement. Then the 3 cars were driven across the street and backed up at an angle in front of the showroom, which would be gone now, but it was next to the this town hall going that way, between the town hall and the gas station. This ritual was a ritual that I waited for with much anticipation. I hoped the next one would be bright blue, because I loved blue. Beyond the auto dealership was a Northrop's ice cream store. There just wasn't enough time on my schedule for what the world could offer. People were always walking by our house on their way uptown to do their shopping. Pausing, they would say, "How do you do, young man? Isn't this a grand day?" And some of those men would even tip their caps. Now, I love to read comic books, and they were sold at Simons's cobblestone store, but I wasn't allowed to go in that store. And that was not really a problem, because Bernard Clary, who was in a class ahead of me, could buy comic books for 10 cents a book. Now, those comic books he would give to me at the end of the year when school was out, and there was lots of them. Now, what do they include? Well, for those 10 cents, he could get Superman, Batman, Commandos, Archie, Joe Palooka, The Lone Ranger, Little Orphan Annie, The Green Hornet, and many other. I can go on and on. And so all those comic books were given to me, and what could I do? Sit on that front porch and read them all summer. That was great. Now, my association with our porch wasn't limited to the summer season. Winter contributed many memorable moments, especially in my preteen years. It seems that we could count on lots of snow. Snow being the cause of all kinds of problems for the people who lived on Piety Hill, the name given to Church Street. Piety Hill was located next to the mobile gas station at a right angle to Main Street. Now, drivers had to slow down, turn the corner. That meant they got about 5 houses up the hill before their frantically spinning tires gave up the fight. The drivers would back down onto Main Street very cautiously, not stopping until they backed up all the way to Northrop's. The driver, then they would try again. Very few ever got past the 7th house because that's where the hill was the steepest. The scenario caused the most excitement if it was snowing heavily between 5 and 6 p.m. when people were trying to get home from work. Main Street got pretty crowded as each driver waited to try his luck. Many times the cars were parked in front of our house all night, and their occupants had to trudge up the not-so-aptly named Piety Hill. Some nights I could measure the intensity of a storm by looking through the street light in front of our house. The swirling flakes contrasted with the dark sky, and as the snow piled higher, the excitement was piling higher within me. My parents relented to my begging, and I got a chance to go out and trample through the drifts that were building up around the corners of the house. The heaviest snowfall that I remember was the blizzard of 44. The whole village came to a standstill. I decided to build a snow fort right in front of the porch. I designed it so that it had an opening, a lookout, shoulder high, and I packed several piles of snowballs. Then I waited for something to move outside. Looking outside. I was looking outside the fort, looking for somebody to move, so I'm not. The fourth, gathering up 5 snowballs, I stepped out from behind the fort. I fired off the first 3 in rapid succession. The fourth, I threw as high as I could, I missed this, because I was looking for something moving. I missed this. I spied my objective. It was a moving prey in the form of Dick Simons, who came into view from the mobile station. He was 13, and I was 10. And he had a wicked arm. And I had to devise a plan, and that's when I was telling you. I threw the first 3 snowballs. After I gathered 5, threw 3 as I stepped out in front of the fort. Then I threw the fourth one as high as I could, way up. So Dick went like this, and I threw the 5th one right there. And that's when King Richard had had enough. He sounded retreat and scurried uptown. As the winter turned to spring, I waited anxiously for Memorial Day. From the vantage of our porch, rapt attention was given to the military units that were borrowed from the National Guard regiment quartered in Rochester. A Sherman tank rattled up and parked in front of our house, and I was the first one who got down to look inside. Talk about excitement. In those days, this was in 1942, and there would all be half-tacks, that Sherman tank, Jeeps, cannons pulled by Jeeps, and all kinds of things. To me, a little kid, it was great. But to the older people that were in that war, it's a whole different story. Anyway, then when I was 11 years old, I thought it was getting pretty big, and I was anxious to help my dad whenever I could. I was proud of the fact that he let me help shovel coal into our basement to get ready for the winter season. Alice McCarthy, who owned the coal business over on Colville Street, let him borrow her coal truck, from time to time, so he could haul coal himself. It was a warm summer day, and we spent all morning and part of the afternoon pouring nearly 12 tons of coal into the cellar bins. Dad stood on the back of the truck, and I shoveled the coal down, and he shoveled the coal down the chute. Now my job was to level off the pile so it wouldn't touch the cellar beams. So I was down cellar. As the coal came in, I'd keep leveling it off because, 11? I forgot what nearly 11 and a half tons of coal. So I'd shovel it like that, clean it off. Now, after those 6 truckloads, the bin was full, and I was black with coal dust. Now, So I went out and flopped on the glider on the front porch. Suddenly, 5 sailors burst out of Northrop's. They hollered and shouted, and as they danced the jig right here on Main Street, they threw their hats up in the air, and I knew what had happened. My mom came out of the screen door and announced quietly that the war was over. It was celebration time, and the festivities gained momentum. As the festivities gained momentum on our porch, was again and again ringside seat. To this time, joyous pandemonium that was lasting until midnight. I can tell you, the fire truck was brought out. Now this was around 5 o'clock at night, and they started squirting all the people on the street. They were so, it was just amazing. And I could sit and watch the whole thing. One thing that happened, my mother got a hold of me around 8:30 because I was riding my bike around, and she said, "You get home, young man, and you get up to bed." So I had to go up to bed. But I had a window up there, and you could see it from here, that looked out on the street. So I kneeled down and watched till probably close to 10 o'clock, all the things that were going on the street. It was amazing. What a time. Let's see. Also, I was sitting on the porch in August one night that year, another year, when I was 17 years old. Tyke Blasey pulled up in his pickup truck. He had 2 guys in front with him and 3 in the back. And he asked me, "Hey, Tish, you want to go to Roseland with us?" And usually I would have jumped off that porch and hopped in that truck in the back. No, I guess, no, not tonight. I'm not going to do it. So I didn't go. Well, coming back from Roseland, Tyke rolled the truck over. No one was killed, but 3 out of the 6 were injured seriously. I thought of the porch when I visited my buddies in the hospital the next day. The reason he rolled over, somebody behind him was playing tricks on him, and ahead of him. So he would want to go past, but they would speed up. And that means a car coming, he'd have to get back in line. And they were doing that coming out of Canandaigua. And when they got to that pond, was it just east of Canandaigua? No, west, just west of Canandaigua. That's when he had to swerve and he rolled the truck over. 3 of those kids were hurt pretty bad. 2 in the truck. One was Jim McKegg, and he was a big kid. He and the other, I think there were 3 that weren't hurt, picked that truck off and pulled it off that one kid that was under it. And I was so glad that I didn't go. Now, when I drive through Victor today, it's kind of difficult for me to look at that house because I can think of all the things as I was growing up. Now, the garage and the basketball court are gone. The house is used for some kind of commercial adventure. The porch looks forlorn, void of any furniture, no kids, no laughter. The property seems abandoned. I feel a guilty twinge inside, like I have let down a buddy. I'm going to go to Victor today, any day, and I'm going to pay my respects to that grand old place. I'm sure my tears will reflect the memories of that aging porch, the porch of my youth, the porch I loved so much. And I say, goodbye, old friend. Everything's still there, but it's all different to me. So that's the story of the front porch. I'm going to read a story about my Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben Tischer. In fact, I can give you, I got it here, I think. Oh, come on. I usually have these things already. Oh. I want to show you this picture. It's in this book, that new book. But those are the Tischer brothers and one sister. Uncle Ben was probably 300 pounds, at least. And he was a big, big man. So this is the story of Uncle Ben. Pardon? I don't know. I'm not very good. I'm in bad shape. Well, anyway, they all had nicknames. I won't tell you all the nicknames, but my name as a little child was Tucker. So when you hear the word Tucker, that's me. Now, it says, Tucker, if you want to go with me, wipe the snow off the car. I'm going to go up and check on Ben. Then I'll stop at Floyd's. What about Uncle Tom? Can we see him too? If we have time, hurry up, get the broom off the porch. I grew up in the small town of Victor, New York, which is about 20 miles southeast of Rochester. Victor had a main street and 4 side streets. That was basically it. One of those side streets was Piety Hill, which rose quite steeply across from my dad's funeral home on Main Street. Up north, he said we're going up north. Up north meant going up Piety Hill and into the country, about 6 miles, where my dad's 2 older brothers and 1 younger brother, had farms all near each other. It didn't take much to get a 10-year-old boy revved up, and when he heard the word north. On this winter afternoon, the snow was piling up pretty fast in what became known as the blizzard of 44. Dad, you'll have to get a running start. The hill looks pretty slick. Guards that had made it up halfway were carefully inching their way down. My dad was getting upset. Where's Leonard Barry? He should have that hill sanded at least an hour ago. Leonard Barry was the village street commissioner. He was responsible for keeping the streets repaired and in good condition. His main responsibility in the winter was to make sure that all the residents could get up to their jobs without delay, and that included Piety Hill. On this day, Piety Hill needed to be sanded. The village had a small dump truck that was kept loaded with sand, and Barry would drive slowly up the hill, and Donnie Driscoll, gripping a long-handled spade, would stand in the back and sling sand on the hill, on the road. Dad was muttering to himself, "That Barry probably up the firehouse playing pool." I didn't help the situation any when I piped up, "I know where Driscoll is. I saw him go into Northrop's ice cream store. He's got a crush on that Raleigh girl." I was sweeping snow off the windshield of our 41 Buick that was parked in the driveway. "Get the chains out of the garage, Tuck. This storm's not letting up." I got the tire chains that were hanging on a hook next to the hearse, lugged them out to my dad. I felt real important helping him. My dad took one chain and lined it up behind the rear tire on the right side. I did the same on the other side. Still sputtering and wiping snow off his coat, he settled into the driver's seat and slowly backed the car until I motioned to him to stop. The next step was the hardest, because kneeling down, he hauled those chains over the tire, tugging them until he could hook the clamps on the sides. The hill was no problem, but the road above was drifting fast. I don't know if we can make it, Tucker. It's getting pretty deep. Looks like we'll have to back down. And that's when I see we're up on top now, on the Victor Egypt Road. And that's when I saw the yellow light blinking. Dad, Green Hunt's coming. We'll be able to make it to Uncle Ben's, and maybe all the way to Monkey Run. I lost my place. Greeny was navigating Victor's biggest snowplow that was creeping slowly toward us, a monster caterpillar that could fight through snowdrifts, huge snowdrifts. Dad rolled down his window. Greeny shouted from his cab, "Road is all clear all the way to Monkey Run. Shouldn't have any trouble, Vic." Well, even with the chains on, we kind of slithered along. And, let's see. It was slow going. The 15 minutes it usually took to get up the hill to Uncle Ben's took about 3/4 of an hour. I was getting pretty anxious, and then I saw the house. Dad, look! I rolled the window down. Uncle Ben was trudging toward the mailbox out by the road in front of his house. He was in bare feet. My dad smiled. "That's Mossback for you. Doesn't wear any shoes, even in a storm like this. Too much of a bother." I was looking at the tracks he made from the front porch, almost 150 feet to the mailbox. "Hey, Vic, and you there, Tucker?" McCarthy, that was Bernard McCarthy, the one who became the head of the post office here. "McCarthy's got the mail through before the roads got bad. Pull the car up close here. There won't be any more traffic. Come on in. I've got a pot of coffee. Tucker, there's fresh milk in the cooler. Help yourself." As Uncle Ben started back toward the house, I noticed that he wasn't even using the same tracks. Don't his feet ever get cold? Nah, your uncle's one tough old farmer. So who was Uncle Ben? Was he married? Did he have children? What kind of farm did he have? Did he have cows? Whoa, down there, not so fast. Adam Tischer and Mary Guinan were married in 1878. Physically, it was a rather odd marriage. He was a wisp of a man who weighed no more than 140 pounds. His bride, according to their wedding picture, weighed at least twice that much. They bought a 180-acre farm on the Victor Egypt Road, about 6 miles north of Victor. They raised a family of 6 sons and 1 daughter. And that was on the homestead. All the siblings acquired their mother's characteristics as they grew in size. Ben was the second oldest boy, born in 1882. When he married Aunt Margaret, that was his wife, they bought a farm just across from the homestead where they raised 3 boys. My uncle had a real colorful personality. He was big, very big, 130 pounds on 6-foot frame. No flab. He wore denim shirts and dungarees that were held up by big wide straps. suspenders, he usually had a red polka dot dotted handkerchief hanging out of his back pocket. And what a belly laugh. That along with his ruddy red cheeks, red apple cheeks. Anyway, bright blue eyes and a mop of curly white hair. No wonder everyone wanted to get him laughing. As I became a teenager, I began to hear stories of his youth. Stories told by his brothers, his sons and neighbors, stories I have heard over and over, stories that I can tell my children, grandchildren, and yes, even our great-grandchildren. About once a month, Ben would go down to the hotel saloon in Victor to shoot the bull with his cronies. It was told that he was the strongest man in the whole township. One time he told how he could lift a 60-pound weight 50 times over his head. Chester Madison, a black man, didn't believe it and laughed at him, called him a liar, and realized too late he should have kept his mouth shut. Let's see. He lit from the front door with Ben tearing after him. Chester took off across the gravel, leaving my uncle shaking his fist, because remember, he was barefooted. And then he said, that rascal, he knew I was barefooted. I would have thrashed him if I could have gotten a hold of him. That was one story. Now, here's the last story I'm going to tell you. Bud Fowler, let's start here. Back in the days before the 1800s became the 1900s, so this is late 1800s, the town had their own baseball team. Victor was playing Fisher's on a Saturday afternoon in July, and they were playing at Fisher's. Fisher's was ahead 3-0 going into the last inning. Victor, being the home team, had their last ups, and they were able to get the bases loaded with 2 outs. That was the good part. And they had their last ups, of course. They were get the bases. No, that was the good part. The bad part was that Shorty Steffenhagen was coming to the plate. He was the weakest hitter on the team. Couldn't hit his way out of a paper bag. But Bud Fowler was pitching a shutout for Fishers. Could hardly contain himself. A grin a mile wide on his face. The Fishers crowd was hooting and carrying on something fierce. Charlie Kuykendall hollered from third base, "Pour it in there, Bud. This twerp can't hit." Okay, that's like the guy I was telling you about. This twerp can't hit. Fats O'Brien, Victor's manager, happened to look out up over the hill, and that was bordering the ball field. And there was Ben Tischer jogging down, his favorite bat over his shoulder. "Ben, run, hurry up, get down there, you're up." Ben took out his red polka dot handkerchief and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He ambled up, tapped his bat on the plate a couple times, and waved it in the air, and settled in. Somewhere here it was telling how Fats O'Brien, that's when he ran up to Corky Romiser, who was umping the game. He told Corky, "Tischer's going to bat for Steffenhagen." And that's when Ben wiped the sweat from his face. Fowler and the Fisher's crowd lost some of their confidence. And all at the same time, old Charlie Waghorn hollered from the stands, "Okay, Fowler, bear down. This guy is all bluff." Fowler worked the ball 1-2 strike count on Victor's best hitter. The next pitch, crack, a mighty wallop over the chicken coop in left field. Final score, Victor 4, Fisher's 3. The Victor team was jumping all over the place. They would have put Uncle Ben on their shoulders if they could have lifted him. Now, one more thing about this group. It was 1951. I was a junior in high school at Victor Central. Uncle Ben's wife and Uncle Tom's wife had died within 6 weeks of each other that year. Uncle John had accumulated about 2 months of vacation time. They planned a trip to Mexico City. Remember, they all loved to travel. John would drive. He had just bought one of those slant-back Pontiacs that they had way back in those days. And then Tom and Vic would go. And John would drive. He had just bought one of those. Ben, Tom, and Vic would go, sharing expenses. The trip was planned from the middle of January through March. At the last minute, Dad got a funeral. His right leg started twitching when he got nervous. It was twitching now. "I can't go. I can't leave the business." Uncle John was getting upset. "We'll get Carl Zoner to take over." Carl Zoner was a funeral director in Pittsford. "I'm not going to ask him. He's swamped." My mom was watching all of this for a while I was poring over all the maps spread out on our living room rug. She said, "I've got an idea. Why can't Francis go with him?" You think I didn't perk up when I heard that? Uncle John said, "No. Besides, he would tell all our business. He can't go. Besides, he's got school." All right? But Mom didn't back down. She will check with his guidance counselor, and he certainly won't blab on you. You need a 4th person to share expenses. He can take Vic's place. Uncle Tom said, It'll be all right, as long as he doesn't blab or squeal." Uncle Ben just stared. Uncle John was grumbling under his breath. "He will have to pay his share, $200. Charlie Rose, the guidance counselor at Victor. He will get as much, probably more learning on a trip like that than he would if he were here in school. And that's how I got to go with my uncles to Mexico. Now, there's just one more little thing here. 2 little things. So who was, let's see. Where does this go? Now, coming back up out of Mexico, we followed the Yucatan Peninsula around the Gulf. And one of our stops was a motel near New Orleans. Remember, Uncle Ben and Uncle Tom weren't dressed in suits like Uncle John. They were farmers, and they looked like farmers. Well, the evening was mild, and Uncle Ben got to talking with some folks from Iowa. They told us about the acres and acres of corn that they made their money from. Uncle Ben, with his thumbs hitched in his suspenders, said, "Is that so? Well, I'll tell you. We're potato kings from upstate New York. Now, one more thing. On the way back, there was an incident that was really interesting. We were following the Gulf Coast all the way around to Clearwater Beach, Florida. The four of us were ready to walk out on the famous steel pier. You must remember how Uncle Ben and Uncle Tom were dressed. Tom stopped to buy a bag of popcorn for me. About halfway out on the pier, we met a man dressed in very expensive clothes. He had a bright blue silk shirt with a white handkerchief sticking out of his breast pocket. And while he was telling my uncles about his travels, I was throwing popcorn to the seagulls. As I tossed kernels up, they dived and didn't miss. And I had attracted quite a flock. I was fascinated. The gentleman was saying, I have been to every continent and most of the islands of the world. Plop. One of the gulls dumped, just as he said that, all down the front of that nice blue shirt. Now our friend took a white handkerchief, probably a silk handkerchief, out and made the whole mess worse. My three uncles tried to keep a straight face, but Uncle Tom couldn't hold it in. They all started laughing, and you can guess who laughed the loudest as the world traveler walked away in disgust. What a fun day that was. But that was part of the trip. There was a lot of other things, but it's all. Here's a story. Wartime on the home front. Mom was fixing breakfast. I was pouring puppy chow into my little dog's bowl when the phone rang. Oops, someone has probably passed away, she figured. Dad hasn't had a call in over a month. As she lifted the receiver to her ear, I heard a loud voice say, "Is Francis there?" Mom gave me the phone. It was Uncle Ralph McCarthy. "Francis, do you want to know how you could get a lot of milkweed pods? Yesterday I was driving the tractor down the lane and near that marshy area below the pond. There's enough milkweeds there for you to get that radio. Tell your dad, get up here with the hearse. We can fill it up." It was the last Saturday of September of 1943, the end of the contest. Kids all over Victor had been looking for milkweeds. The one who picked the most pods would get a small Philco radio. Man, what a kid wouldn't want a radio of their own. Now, our teachers had explained why pods were needed by our country. Each pod was filled with fluffy white floss attached to seeds. The United States needed silk to make parachutes for our military. Japan had the silkworms, which spun the material that chutes were made of. Our scientists experimented with synthetic products. Let's see. Why haven't I got? Oh yeah. Japan was a silkweed company. We were at war with them. That when the scientists experimented with synthetic products and found they could mix milkweed with other chemicals, they could make certain parts of parachutes that were needed for the airmen. I hollered upstairs, "Dad, Uncle Ralph McCarthy just called. He said to bring up the hearse. We can fill it with pods, and I can get that radio." Green onion sacks had been passed out at school the week before. I had filled only 2 of my 30 sacks. Mom knew how disappointed I was when I couldn't find any more pods behind our property. "Francis, every little bit helps to win the war effort." Well, when Dad came downstairs, I was jumping up and down. "Come on, we gotta get going." Tucker, hold your britches. We'll get there as soon as I get some breakfast. As I jumped out of the hearse at Uncle Ralph's, Dad told me, you know, Tucker, we can't help you one bit. That would be bending the rules. You've got to be on your own. No problem, Dad. I'll be done soon after lunch. Aunt Maggie called Ralph and Dad for coffee, and I staggered down the lane with my load of bags. And when I found all the milkweed circling the pond, if I hurry, I can win that radio. I didn't pay any attention to prickers or rabbits or snakes or anything. It wasn't until almost 4 o'clock that I had all my bags full. I ran back up to the house and hollered, Dad, Uncle Ralph, come with me. I told Dad to back the hearse down the lane. He'd see why. Uncle Ralph and I guided him, and when we got where the bags were piled up, Uncle Ralph smiled. We've got... Francis, by golly, Crippins, you've won that radio. Well, we stuffed the bags into the hearse, filling it all the way to the back. Be careful, Francis, when you shut that door. Your dad will have a fit. That stuff starts flying all over everything. When Dad and I pulled up to the bus garage that afternoon, we spread our load out on the floor. Leonard Corey was the official judge. He counted 27 bags. That was more than Harold Garling's 14 bags. Harold had the most up until we pulled in. And Joe Angelo, one of my classmates, sauntered over to me. Tischer, you didn't do that all yourself. Your dad helped you pick those pods. Angelo, you're full of it. My dad did not help me. I picked them all by myself. Look at how sticky my hands are. Our argument was interrupted by someone shouting, Hey, here comes Abe Hendricks. His truck was loaded almost to the top with bulging green onion sacks. Bobby, his son, jumped out. He had a smile on his face a mile wide. He beat the 5 o'clock deadline by 20 minutes. And when his bags were counted, he had 48. Charlie Mahaney asked, Where'd you get them all? Down in East Victor. I followed Mud Creek for about 2 miles. How'd you know where to go? Well, you know Billy Loon that runs the cider mill. Mahaney nodded. I know him. Well, he told my old man, and I started picking last week after school. The mayor emotioned over all of us kids and catted around. Well, Bobby, congratulations. You won the radio. Harold Garling punched me on the arm. Too bad, Tischer. Just wasn't enough, was it? You know something, Harold? Now I know what my dad means when he says, don't count your chickens before they hatch. And that was, if you're getting tired or yawning, I can stop anytime. So, now this is a story that...
Just to save your voice, maybe if you could do one more story and then open it up for questions.
Okay. Man, I don't know which one to read. Barely Made It was a story about my cousin Johnny. Well, I'm going to read it. Then there's Army Recruits. I like these stories. Reading Stinks. Friends. Guadalcanal. All strings attached. Okay. I want to read this one too. Friends. Yep. Let's see here. This is when I was teaching over in Bloomfield, and I was teaching 6th grade. A hush settled over the group gathered around the ping pong table. All eyes were on the teacher and the books piled in front of him and on the table. Welcome to 6th grade reading class. I hope you all had an exciting summer vacation. Before we look at these new books, I'd like you to do a bit of writing for me. Think of books that you have read over the summer or favorites that you have enjoyed in the past and tell why you like them. I'll give you those notebooks to keep, these notebooks to keep you so you can write journal entries from day to day. Now, Mark was a big kid, big lad for his age. He gave me a look of disdain. I hate reading, and I hate writing even more. Well, that's interesting, Mark. Why don't you write about why you don't like reading and writing? In fact, you could start making entries about things you like and don't like in this notebook that I'm giving you, just like the rest of the kids. As I glanced around the group, as they were writing, I couldn't help noticing Mark's first journal entry. And I've got it right here. This is the original entry. And it's titled Reading, Readding. I think reading stinks. I had 3 main classes, and they were pretty okay, I guess. And he spells guess G-E-S. And were is spelled W-H-E-R-E. I do not have any homework today. I hope it keeps up. Keeps, C-E-P-S. It is the end of the week, and I am going home. That's signed Mark, and that's on his story right there. Well, anyway. As I glanced around the group, as they were writing, I thought of Mark's entry, and about 5 minutes of writing, I said to the group, I'm going to tell you about a boy who wanted to write, but was very difficult for him to do. His name was Wilson Rawls. Wilson grew up under very meager conditions in Cherokee country in Oklahoma during the beginning of the last century. He liked to read, and his favorite book was Jack London's Call of the Wild. In fact, he carried it around in his backpack and read it over and over whenever he got the chance. By the time he was 18, Wilson decided he wanted to write also. Not being able to afford writing paper, he wrote any story he could find, mostly on grocery bags. He wrote 5 different stories this way. Then he did something strange. He threw them all in the fire. In anger, he said, I can't spell one, and I can't correct what I've written. Well, when Sophie, the young lady who would later become his wife, heard what he had done, she said, Wilson, you pick one of those stories and rewrite it, and I'll help you with the spelling and the editing. And kids, that is how Where the Red Fern Grows came to be the book that we're going to read next together. Mark told me he didn't want to read. Mark, you don't have to read, but you're part of this group. And I expect you to sit at the table with the rest of us during reading time. We took turns reading. I asked for volunteers to read out loud. There were many eager hands. Sometimes I read to the group. Other times we read several pages silently and then talked about the interesting things we had discovered. I noticed at the end of school that first week, Mark's journal lying on the floor next to his desk. I picked it up and read the first page, and that's what this was. I smiled to myself as I placed his notebook back on his desk. For the first 2 weeks during reading class, Mark put his head down on the table, never participated nor showed any interest. Then one day in October, One of the boys had just finished reading a section orally when Mark raised his hand. Yes, Mark? Could I read? And Mark read. Now this is what he read. It's quoted. On and on, mile after mile, I moved along. I saw faint gray streaks appear. Now several paragraphs later, after Mark had finished reading, I could tell that everyone around the ping pong table wanted to applaud. But we just smiled and continued on. From that day on, Mark became a regular member of our reading group. I'm sure it was Old Dan and Little Ann, the two little red-boned coonhounds in the story, that worked their magic and wormed their way into Mark's heart. As the weeks passed and we were approaching the Christmas holidays and the classroom party was winding down, I had finished opening gifts that had been so generously bestowed upon me, started dismissing students to their buses. Mark was the last one to leave, but as he walked out the door, he hesitated and came back. Mr. Tischer, I've got something for you. And Mark handed me a gift that I could tell he had wrapped. He could hardly wait for me to open it. I wrote it all myself, he said, with pride. The lady downstairs who runs the publishing company helped me put it together. It's for you. I looked at the title, The Great Adventure by Mark Templer, and as I opened to read the first page, there was in big print that said, "This book is dedicated to Mr. Tischer." He looked at me and smiled. As he started out the door, again, I said, "Mark, this is one of the nicest gifts I've ever gotten from anybody." He just waved and was gone. And as I skimmed the pages, I could tell there was an encounter with aliens who had been subdued by Mark and his pal Rick. And finally, on the last page, there was a word about the author. It read, "I like football and bowling, dogs, snakes. I like heights, and I kind of like reading too." And that, no. Well, I'll just say quickly, I won't read it. Friends? So it's paired up to you. I'll just talk about it a little bit here. Oh, let's see. This is, Daryl and I were traveling over in Europe, and we were, had the opportunity to stop in Amsterdam to visit the attic where the Frank family hid out during the war, back in the 1940s, hiding from the Germans. In exploring the house, I went upstairs and looked out the back window. And there it was, the chestnut tree that Anne Frank mentioned several times in her diary. And I hollered, "Daryl, come up here quick. The chestnut tree, it's still alive." It was then and there that I had the idea for Friends. The chestnut tree would be telling the story from that point of view. And that's when I told the story. But the tree talks all the time, does all the talking. And one day it noticed a dark-haired girl with black eyes looking out at the tree. And the tree was looking back at her, and Tree could tell she was sad, but he said, I'll try to make her feel better. And all through the year, he would show leaves, had birds building nests, and all kinds of things. And she was his audience. Well, then one day, there was another person at the window, and it was a boy. And she and the boy were looking out at the tree. And the tree was really happy to have these friends. Well, then one day, they weren't there anymore. The tree was upset and disappointed. Where are they? And then the tree heard the planes going over and dropping bombs. Those are the Allied trains going over the Netherlands on their way to Germany. And the tree got upset because I hope it doesn't hurt our friends, or I hope it doesn't hurt me. But that was it. Well, then one day, the friend was gone. And the end of the story is this is what she said. The tree said, myself, I'm doing fine, at least on the outside. I continue to grow in size, though my attitude quite somber. I still shelter the annex. Now that address where those people who lived, the Frank family, became a museum, and it has over 600,000 people a year. Now, not long ago, I saw the astonished face of a man peering out at me. Then he was gone, and he only reappeared with the woman. He pointed excitedly, and the lady seemed to be caught up in his enthusiasm. I was glad because I provide the only living link between the lives of those young victims of tyranny and the persecution that the curious throngs of the future generate. Persecution and the curious throng. If I could talk to them, I would tell them of the confusion, the misery, and the death of a beautiful young girl, her family and friends, a young girl that I overheard saying, I still believe that people are really good at heart. She also said, I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look up in the heavens, I think it will all come out right. And she said, the tree said, I honestly desire that my branches begin to age. As they begin to age, I will be able to scatter seeds, and hopefully a new chestnut tree will sprout up and will be able to record for history peace and happiness and love among the nations of the world. That was just amazing. And maybe you've already seen the story of Anne Frank on television. Okay, that and a couple other things. This is my brother. Darrell and I and my brother and his wife were on a group that took a trip to Israel. And while we were there was another man in the group, and he said, Frank, how much older is your brother than you? And I looked at him. He's 9 years younger than I am. And I never let him forget that. Now here he is. This is the Methodist Church here in Victor. And as kids, we used to see if we could walk all the way around the church from one side to the other without falling off this ledge. And only Tony Mangiamelli could do it because he was really agile. But we would try. Now here's Gene just a few years ago, and he's trying it himself to walk around the church. This is a good picture of Victor in our house where we lived. There's another picture of it. But those are some pretty neat. This is the way it looked back in, I think it was 39. Really changed. There was another thing I was going to show you before we stop. Of course, that's in that book. May not find it. Oh, that the veteran that was in the war, he came to our church. We go to the Wesleyan Church in Canandaigua, and he walked in the door and he had a red hat on, Semper Fi, and he was old. And I said, I bet you were in World War II in the Pacific. I said, yes, I was. He says, I was on Guadalcanal, and we were supposed to have Guadalcanal mopped up in 2 weeks. He said it took us almost 6 months. He said, I got badly injured. He said, I was on a hospital ship going back to San Diego, and the ship would go like this, trying to avoid submarines. They got to San Diego, they put him in the hospital. He was badly injured, and he was shell-shocked, shaking all over. Doctor said, we have a new idea, and we'd like to try it on you if you want. He said, you can do anything you want. They hypnotized him, and it worked. And he couldn't believe that he could get out of that bed and walk through hypnotism. And boy, he was a great guy. He was 82 years old when I saw him coming into church. And 160 pounds. And boy, were his muscles loose, eyes shiny, and he was so bright. I said, his name was Bob Blum, B-L-U-M. I said, well, Bob, what do you do now? He says, I'm so busy I can't keep up. And he was working in woodwork and stuff, making furniture, and he made kiosks. He made a big cross for a church nearby. And then he told me, he said, Frank, if you like, I'll teach you how to make these. And these are little wooden crosses. And I've made probably about 300 of them maybe, giving them out to different people all over the place. Ecuador, everywhere we've been. Anyway, I would first cut them out and then saw them down so they weren't sharp. And then I'd dip them. This one has been dipped, I think, 4 times. You dip it in, what's it called, Darrell? Dip it in, you can't buy the stuff around here. I can get it over in Canisius, I think. It's very hard to find. But anyway, I dip these, and then when they dry, I put a string on them, and people can wear them. And a lot of people have worn these, but this one started by Bob Blum. He showed me how to make it. I got a saw and drill and stuff, and I could make them all. I made over 300 of them, and people like to wear them. So that's the story of Bob Blum, and that's where I'll stop because. And you got any questions that you want to ask, or do you want to just go home and go to bed?
When you got back from your trip to, what was it, Mexico, with your uncles, did you talk?
During that trip?
No, did you tell everybody what they did?
Oh, no. No. I didn't tell them where they ate. The only thing I said, they would eat a big, what do you call it, a slab of bologna or something like that, and they would have bread in the back of the car, and they ate a lot of bread and bologna. So, but no, I just kept it all secret. Good question. Yep.
Went up to the Thousand Islands with my grandson when he was 12, and we did some stuff up there, which I won't get into, but we told him, Joseph, what happens in the islands stays in the islands. His mother knew everything that went on in about 20 minutes when he got back home.
That's where, I had some quick memories that I could tell you, if I can find them. They're here somewhere, but I won't even look at them. One was, of course, I broke a lot of windows in Victor playing ball as a kid. And one of them was right at our own home, funeral home, during a funeral. And the glass came down on the people, on the person sitting at the window, all over the casket and the person that was in it. So that's one memory. Another one I have, we were playing ball over at the Victor Foods Canning Company. At that time it was run by Everett and Albert Garlock. Well, when I got up to bat, I hit one over the wires, over School Street, and crossed and hit between the two windows on the second floor. And Mr. Underhill was sitting on the first floor. What has that Tischer kid done now? But we were playing, and a blue bus pulled into the parking lot at the canning factory. And we all watched. The door opened, and two guards with rifles got out, and then about 15 German prisoners got out. And so we walked over and watched. I said to an older kid, Bobby Heenahan, why are those guys smiling and laughing if they're prisoners? And he said, because they're not being shot at. And some of them didn't even go back to Germany. Some of them stayed right here. But that was amazing. I never had seen anything like that. Was anything else, Charles, that we wrote down? That's it? Oh, I'm sorry. Good thing I didn't go any farther. I'll tell you another thing. If I get started, sometimes I can't stop. And that's my problem. There's so many things to talk about. Okay, I'll give up.
Are there any other questions? Frank, thank you very much for coming.
A lot of the rest of the stories are in that book, so,
And thanks to all of you for coming.
yep. But you can see I can't read orally anymore because it's gone. And I can read, I read all the time silently. I read many books. I can read fast, and that's my problem. When I try to read orally, it's not good anymore. Okay. Yep.